Okay, so we are officially live. We're officially live. It's November the 16th, 2018. Hello to people online and to people watching this, and it's after the fact. We're delighted to have you. My name is Leanne Reagan. I'm the founder of the Learning Development Roundtable. I'm just going to speak for about 5 minutes, just do some housekeeping, and then I'll throw it over to Natalie, who is going to be talking about gamification of learning today. And know that we are recording this session. So all of this will be available online. If you think, oh, that thing that Natalie said was so great, I want to go back to that. It'll all be there for you. So just a quick notion, we're using Zoom. So has anyone used Zoom before? So, yeah, so it's a great tool. It's like, my friend describes it, it's like Skype, but better. So you can, as instructional folks, you can do some cool things with it. There's breakout rooms and whiteboards and comments and all of that. So it's quite cool. There is a free version and a paid version. And I just want to express, it's 6 years, November 30th. This year will be 6 years of the Learning and Development Roundtable. So I thought we could go around just really briefly, and Kathy, I can see you're online, so feel free to take a turn using audio, or if you want to do a comment, you can participate that way as well. It's up to you. But I'd love to know something you're celebrating. Jenny, do you? And it can be something grand and big and beautiful, and it can be a small little nugget that's important and special for you. It could be anything. Like getting out of bed this morning. It could be anything. Wow. So Jenny's son just moved. Work permit came through during work in sub-Saharan Africa after a year waiting for the work. Woohoo! And also, I didn't say this before, people want to also say their names. Great. Halima's celebrating her new website. That is a big accomplishment. Great. Oh. Yeah. So just in case folks online can't hear, Suzanne's celebrating good weather, finally. We're here in Nairobi, it's nice weather. And her longest post ever, she's been here 3 years. So. Yeah. Yeah. Oh. Wow. So Russian said that she just moved to Nairobi 1.5 months ago, so celebrating being here. And her baby's 1 year, I was going to say anniversary, 1 year birthday. So that's great. I guess your 1 year anniversary would be in a month, potentially, if you don't have other kids. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wow. Oh, nice, nice. Oh, beautiful. Yeah. Nice. Yeah. So in case you can't hear that, Claudia is celebrating. She's just been here a month as well and celebrating friendship. And yeah, it's very special when your kids have other homes that they can go to and feel like you can share that. So my name's Leanne, and I can't quite believe it. I'm celebrating 20 years this month of being self-employed. So 20 years. I just, yeah, it's amazing. And 6 years of the Roundtable. So those are big reasons to celebrate. Ellie, I'm going to unmute you. And is there something we'll do another introduction in just a minute, but is there something you want to say about something you're celebrating?
Well, two things happened this morning that I'm celebrating. One is some crazy people asked me to star in a Tanzanian bongo movie, which is kind of a genre of fun, almost horror movies, and they wanted a European woman to act. So it's hilariously funny. And we did a scene this morning at my local school. They came to my village. So all the children in my village are now wondering why Natalie has a film crew following her around. And it was so good to play.
Natalie, can you tell us where you are? Because everyone might not know where you're coming to us from.
I am from Australia, but I came to visit Tanzania 15 years ago and stayed for 1 year and have 2 children to a Tanzanian man. And then 2 years ago, we decided to relocate. So now I've been living in Zanzibar on the east coast in a little place, Jambiani, near Paje.
Zanzibar. So an Aussie coming to us live from Zanzibar, and we're in Kenya. It's amazing to be stopped.
And because in the movie they wanted me to interact with the children, and I don't normally sit on the ground because their affection can be overwhelming. And whoa, it was overwhelming. There was 20 of them sitting on my lap, draping off me. It was quite beautiful to be literally, a puddle of beautiful children. So that's what I'm celebrating today, a great big hug from gorgeous kids and some fun on a movie set with very professional, talented film crew.
Great. And Kathy, if you feel like you're so inclined and you want to say hello. Oh, there you are. Good morning.
Hi. I'm literally across the hall. I just have to stay here for a while. So I'm saying hello from Gigiri. So I'm just happy it's Friday, and I got to swim this week. So that's good for me. And Halima, I'll talk to you later.
Nice. Okay.
Okay.
So for folks maybe who might be watching this later, Gigiri is a neighborhood in Nairobi. So and we're at the UN in Gigiri. So she's literally close. So a couple things, because I really want to move this on to Natalie. We've been approved for another year of meeting at the UN, which is really no small feat, because I'm not a UN staff person, so this is a really unusual arrangement. So that's great. And I've got the dates here. January 18th, we'll get more information out to you very soon. But that's going to be some topic around global, multicultural, international kind of education. We alternate speakers and networking sessions. We mix those two up. So January 18th, Solène will be coming to us from maybe here. I'm not sure if she'll have moved yet. And February 15th is a networking session, which is more kind of informal, and we do some small group work. And we're going to talk about games for learning. So now we really hope you can attend if that's of interest. And just basically other games that you've used in learning. And if you're going, I don't know what you're talking about, that's okay. There's going to be lots of folks who will share games that they've used. And then basically the dates are there for the rest of the year. So I'll get those events up on our Facebook group soon. But make a note of them, please. We'd love to have you. Ideas for guest speaking sessions and networking sessions are always very welcome. Pretty soon we should have a video out about the roundtable. It's been filmed, and now we're just waiting for it to be edited. We're also, I meant to check this, we're also accepting donations. For every meeting we collect money. 300 shillings of that goes towards the name badges, but the rest of it we keep and then donate once a year. And the group is able to nominate organizations to donate that money to. So if you haven't already, the The link is in the agenda. Please take it. There's like, I don't know, 5 questions, and one of them is what's your name. So it's very simple, and then we'll vote on that probably at the January meeting. So we really want to make sure that we've got some people who fill that in. So does anyone here have a group that they could think about nominating? Or have you nominated? We put the group in kind of. So, okay, so think about that. I mean, you might have someone that. Yes, yeah. Great, great. So the criteria is pretty loose. It's people, an organization that you think is really committed and passionate about education, about learning and development, who make a good impact in this country. Somewhere, they don't have to be national, they can be very, very local. It's not a lot of money. We're talking a couple $100. Yeah. So please take, literally, if you click that link, you'll go to the form, you fill in the questions, and then it's all captured. And then whatever nominations we receive, this group decides who gets that. So last year, we gave it to a group that's doing education with pastoralist children up in northern Kenya, in Turkana. Yeah. Okay, and then just real quick, make sure that you're on the mailing list. If you get the invitations directly from me, that means that you are on the list. Hi Sarah, we can see that you've joined. Welcome. We're just doing some quick introductions or housekeeping, and then I'm going to pass it over to Natalie. So make sure that you've received the information from me if you want to be on the mailing list. This is another thing to celebrate. I have an automatic process now. So you can share this link, and that's how people can get on the list to get information about meetings. And then I've got the donation envelope here, so I'm just going to pass this around. We ask if you're able to donate $300. That covers the cost of the badge. Requested donation is $1,000 if you're able to, and we'll pass that over there too. Yeah. Well, you can donate as much as you like. The suggested donation is $1,000 if you're able to. But we don't want to preclude anybody from being able to come because that's too much. So make the decision of what works for you. Do you have any questions? Anyone have any questions? Sorry? Oh, and you can, okay, and you can M-Pesa too. There's a number on there to M-Pesa. Okay, so I want to introduce our amazing speaker, Natalie. I met her in Mauritius 2 years ago, I think. I went to her workshop on gamification of learning. And are you looking for security? Are you looking for security meeting? No, oh, yeah, this is 6. That's 6. Sorry, it's okay. So I met Natalie in Mauritius at the e-learning Africa conference, and I was really impressed by the breadth and depth of her knowledge, and I was also, as a learning person, really impressed that she could teach. So you don't often get those two things together. So if this is your first meeting, know that our tradition is I ask the guest speakers for 6 words that have little stories about them behind those words. And then you pick 2 or 3 of those words. So Natalie's words are play, diversity, education, technology, East Africa, and motivation. So what's one word that pops out at you? You want to know the story behind that. What was that, Jenny? Motivation. Okay, so motivation is one of them. What's another one? Play. Okay, and one more? Education. Okay, so Natalie, if you can introduce yourself with the stories behind education, motivation, and play.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'll start with those words and then I'll give you a bit more of a background on my life and where I am and where I've been. I think the scene that comes to mind when you give me those 3 words together is being a casual high school teacher when you turn up in the morning and they give you a magic wand and say you are now a science teacher and a history teacher and a cricket teacher, and every 55 minutes you change with a different classroom and different students. For me, it was an interesting research experience on how the energy in each room is so different. So you walk into the maths room and you've got this bunch of students, and there's a certain energy and vibe, motivation, if you like, happening. And then 1 hour later, I see these same children on the sporting field. And then after lunch, I see them in the drama room. And it's the same group of children. But what fascinated me was the difference between their motivation levels in the different spaces. Obviously, the physical spaces of those three scenarios, I'm telling you, are very different. You've got your desks and your chairs in the maths room. You've got your sports field. And then you've got your drama room, which is inside but doesn't have the chairs and the tables. And it made me wonder about the culture that we create within a classroom, that as soon as you walk in the door, there's a certain expectation of behaviour, and the physical world that we create and the culture, and then what people do within that space. For me as a teacher, I'm actually the one that has a lot of power to create and change that energy and motivation, which pretty much sums up where my career has taken me as well.
Great. So, Natalie, I just want to let you know and folks online know that right now I'm sharing my screen. So and I've turned off my video so it's not distracting. So folks are just seeing you and my screen on my computer. When you're ready, you just let us know, and you can switch to your screen if you want to.
Yeah, okay, we can switch now.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and we'll go over to you. And welcome, Sarah. We can see that you're online. Welcome, welcome. Great.
So there's a few people online and a few people in the room, yeah? So there's about 8 of us all together, is that right?
6, 7, 8, 9 of us, including
9.
You.
Wonderful. Yeah. Okay, so that helps me make lots of choices about how I'm going to present, because now I've got an idea of how many are virtual and how many are around. So just very, very quickly, introduction about me. I am an Australian mum of 2 children. I'll switch to the screen. It's got a few photos of me and my 2 children in the left. And this village that I mentioned before in Jambiani is predominantly Muslim. And we have an NGO here that is, the mission is to promote and support Swahili culture. So it's a very big umbrella where we're running education projects. These women on the right are learning some basic business and entrepreneurial skills through soap making and basket weaving. And we have drummers and dancers and performers at our culture centre. There is actually a cave, so people come to see the cave and go swimming in the cave, and while they're here they learn about Swahili history and enjoy some Swahili food, and then some Swahili performances are being more theatrical performance and storytelling are what we're planning on doing. And the proceeds from this project are creating educational opportunities for local children to learn more about Swahili history, and for the local village to fund teachers in whichever areas they're interested. So I'm still working in education, but I have dropped a lot of the technology out of my life in the last few years, and I must say I really miss it, and I'm trying to get back in to some e-learning and taking on a few contracts lately, advising and being involved in designing, and hopefully bringing in my focus on motivation and engagement in the design of the online resources. But before I jump into the topic, it's your culture here to have an icebreaker. So my idea for an icebreaker was to play a game. I thought it would be rather appropriate for what we're talking about. So for those online, I'm not sure if the 2 of you online can find a shared space to play a game of noughts and crosses in. You could open up a Google document and collaboratively play noughts and crosses if you're tech savvy.
Actually,
so for the people in the room, yeah?
I can put them in a breakout room.
Okay, that'd be great. And they can do noughts and crosses. There's a whiteboard that they can do it on.
Yeah. So
yeah.
I haven't tried the whiteboard feature in Zoom yet, but they can talk. So, so Kathy and Sarah, if you're interested, I'm just going to create a breakout room where you guys can talk to each other without us hearing, and maybe you can describe.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to do that now.
Yep. I'm going to put my video on.
Okay, so so Kathy and Sarah, you should have a link saying that you should be able to join the breakout room. Do you see it? Okay, Kathy, you're in. Sarah, you're in. Great. So for those watching, this is how you do the breakout rooms. It's so simple. You say how many rooms, etc. And just
so they've gone off now. Does that mean they can't hear me? So we should have told them to come back in like 3 or 5 minutes.
I can broadcast a message to them. So I'll just tell them. Okay. So
hopefully they can open up a whiteboard in their room, and both of them can annotate. They may have to be presenters. Do that.
I've just sent them a message saying we'll bring them back in a couple minutes.
Yeah, cool. And for people in the room, you can use an old-fashioned technology called paper and pencil. So grab a partner. I'm not sure how many people actually know how to play this game. So can I get an indication out of everybody there? Do at least half of you know how to play the game that you can teach somebody, or you all know?
So we're just having a question about if everyone knows how to play noughts and crosses. Yeah, okay, I think so. Do you want to play?
Yeah.
Do you want to play? Are you guys playing together? Okay, so, some folks here don't have pen and paper, so...
You come to an online conference about e-learning. We probably should have warned you that we were going to use paper.
Okay, we're good. Do you need a pen? Okay. Yeah. Okay, do you want to go first?
So I can't see what's going on there, but I'll tell you what happened last time I did this when I was face-to-face in Mauritius, was a lot of people didn't know this game, which helps me figure out if this is an Australian game or an English game, or just how many people in the world actually know this game.
Sorry, Natalie, can I just ask you, do you want me to bring Kathy and Sarah back?
It's okay, we'll give them a few minutes to play. Maybe I'll stop chatting and I'll wait until they get back, otherwise they're missing out.
Okay. Have you guys all played? Okay, so we've all played one game on our end. I'm not sure where Kathy and Sarah are. Do you want us to?
Okay. So let me know when they're back.
You want me to bring Kathy and Sarah back?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
So it takes 60 seconds for them to, I've just told them that we'll come back and then it automatically will shut those rooms in 49 seconds now. Isn't this cool? That's so neat. And I'm kind of bummed because there is a whiteboard feature, but I don't know how to use it yet. So
okay,
next time.
We can practice.
And I'll let I'll let you know the countdown is going on. We're at 25 seconds. Okay, I think they're back.
Okay, so I did this activity at the eLearning Africa conference last month in Rwanda, and what surprised me was that there were people from all over Africa and the world. So I had to ask people how many knew this game of tic tac toe or noughts and crosses. So today, I think did you say everybody knew how to play it? So that was 9 out of 9.
I'm not sure about Sarah and Kathy.
Yeah. So this is
New.
yeah. Okay. So it was interesting to realize that I know this game from my childhood, but I don't know if it's just Australia or if it's the US and England or Canada or different parts of Africa. And it's a fundamental part of my childhood to play this game. But let me ask you honestly, how did you feel when I suggested playing noughts and crosses? Did you think it's going to be fun, or did you have a different feeling? Tell me what you're thinking. You can just talk to each other, and Leanne can pass back the general group comments, and Kathy and Sarah, you can make comments in the chat, and we'll just combine all of this feedback. So the question is, how did you feel? What was your emotion when I suggested playing noughts and crosses? And you can be honest.
Someone said nostalgia. I was impressed because Jenny asked if everyone knew. And I don't call it noughts and crosses, I call it tic-tac-toe. But I was really impressed that she thought to ask, does everyone know it? And then I was like speeding ahead, like, okay, does everyone know it? Are they going to feel included? Are they not going to feel included? You know, So.
So what other emotions did people have?
I was wondering what the trick question is.
Wondering what the trick question was.
There is a trick question. It's coming. It was not just random fun. I have a plan.
And Kathy's saying in the chat, curious, and especially via Zoom, playing it via Zoom.
Mm.
And so, did someone else say something?
So when I played this in Mauritius in the room with physical, real people, there was a lot of laughter, and they wanted 15 minutes for this activity, whereas you guys didn't. 2 minutes was enough for you. So.
And Suzanne just said, oh, it's a simple game, kind of like that. Yeah, that's what she was thinking.
Okay, so it's a simple game if you know how to play it. So now the question is, who here knows how to win? Who knows the secret to make sure you win? Tic-tac-toe.
I tried, she blocked me.
So we've all got we're holding secret cultural knowledge here. If you do this with a beginner, you can just toy with their brain for a good, I don't know, how long do you reckon it takes to figure out? I'm sure you've all done this to some unsuspecting child. You start playing with them and they think that there's no pattern. And then after about 10 or 15 goes, they realize that you're winning all the time. And then their emotions and their head changes and they go, aha, this is not so simple. There's a pattern. And then they start looking for the pattern, and you can feel the emotions changing now. The person, either a child or an adult who's never experienced it, is now determined. They want to know what is the pattern, and they will force you to keep playing because they're watching you until they see what you know that they don't know. And then that moment, that light bulb moment where they see the pattern, and then none of us want to play anymore. The game is not fun. So if I asked you to play noughts and crosses or tic-tac-toe for 30 minutes, you would say this is not fun anymore. So what I'm hoping to take you through is a definition of what is fun and what is a game. Tic-tac-toe is a game, but it's only a game for a very finite period of time, and then it would become a chore, and you would begrudge me making you do it over and over again because the result is too predictable and the patterns are too known. And a lot of my presentation today is asking you to really define words like fun and game and play, and you're all very proficient English speakers, so I can really push this with you, that we use these same words in very, very different contexts and with very different objectives around the words. So again, I'll ask you all to use your piece of paper or the chat room. Just write a sentence with the word play in the sentence.
And Natalie, I'm just going to jump in to let everyone know if you're that Natalie is very graciously going to share the PowerPoint, so you'll have access to this deck. We'll make that available for you. So use the word play in a sentence. Natalie, just so you know, your mic is close to your mouth, and sometimes we can hear you breathing.
Okay.
Yeah. That's why I muted you earlier. All the ins and outs, right? I think folks are finished on our end.
Yeah. And we've got some comments in the chat room.
Do you want Kathy and Sarah to write down their sentence in the chat?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to lead off with mine just to get that going. Thinking of my son. He's adept at making a play on words.
Okay, so your son is adept at making a play on words.
And Kathy's saying play is good for the mind. You guys want to share yours? I love to play with my daughter.
Play is important in the workplace.
Play is important in the workplace. I play the piano. I hope to keep playing today and always. Oh, nice, nice. I wish my kids would play outside more than on their devices. And I think that's all of us, yeah, that are physically in the room.
Great. Okay, so we've got quite a broad use of the word play, involving musical instruments. Playing on words is something that we really do in our minds rather than a game. We're talking about playing outside. And just pay attention over the next month of your life how many times you hear the word play, and that somebody mentioned playing in the workplace. It is something that we use to cover adult activities as well as children's activities. So it's certainly got many, many meanings in our English language. And for us as trainers I'm assuming that you're all working in the adult education field in learning and development, is that right?
Not necessarily. I think it would be right to say that we all have an interest in education and learning.
Okay.
We're not all necessarily working in the field.
Okay. So what I'm talking about actually does apply across all ages and all contexts, but I'll keep my conversations around more an adult learning environment because of the audience I'm speaking to. And what we want to do as trainers and educators can also be described as behaviour change. Somebody comes to us with a certain set of behaviours, and somebody tells us it's our goal to change that behaviour. And training and education are the tools that we want to see them doing something different, and that generally implies them knowing and believing and valuing something different, so therefore their behaviour is going to change. And gamification is something that I wanted to explain. It's slightly different to games, because in a game you're not always pushing for behaviour change. You might be, but gamification, it's certainly targeted around getting somebody to do something, whether it's in health or school or marketing and branding. You're really looking at using elements of playing games to influence somebody's behaviour. So it's quite manipulative, really, is the word, and it certainly has its downside and its dark side. So I don't go into this with sugarcoating it, telling you that it's a neutral tool. Most of us have been subjected to gamification and people offering certain incentives to get us to change our behaviours to buy their products more, and that's also really is gamification. So let me go back to this this original game when I said, would you like to play a game? Just here's 4 different possible reactions, and I'm thinking more of my class of teenagers now because you're all a bit more mature and polite than them. Generally, the teenagers I teach in Australia, you'll get the very positive, yeah, I'm up for it. Then you get the second reaction of the resistance. It's like, why do you want me to play a game? I came here to learn. I did not come to waste my time. I want direction. I want to know what I'm doing, and you're too scary and loose in what you're asking me to do, so I'm not committed reaction. Then you get the third response of, am I going to have some fun with other people? Am I going to interact? Is this a multiplayer game? Do I have to do it on my own? And then the fourth reaction is also a little bit confrontational. It's, what am I going to get? Am I going to get a prize if I win? And those 4 different types of reactions are used to explain 4 different player types. So game designers have their training centres and their Bibles, and I try to steal ideas from them because they've got a lot more money than us. They do a lot more research, and their prime reason for existing is engagement and fun and entertainment and motivation, whereas for us in the education field, it's more of a side thought than the core of our business. So I love to learn from game designers. These 4 types that they...
Sorry, Natalie. We've just had a great comment from Kathy who said, yeah, how different or similar is it to budge theory? Which, does it, Kathy, did you mean budge or nudge? I don't, do you guys know budge theory? Nudge theory. Yeah, nudge, yeah. So nudge theory. So, and if it's possible to explain briefly what nudge theory is, Natalie or Kathy, if you want to explain.
Yeah, Kathy, go for it. I don't know what nudge theory is, so yeah, fill me in. So it's all around, so it's around behavioral economics. So basically, some of the politicians in the UK, this is a fascinating field. It's basically around, and I'm not an expert, so Kathy, if I'm explaining it wrong, jump in. But basically, how do you affect change by just getting people to do a little thing? So the government in the UK, I think it was, wanted people, they were giving money to people who would put more insulation in their attics, and no one, they were like, here, take this money, and like nobody did it. No one took it up on them. They realized the nudge that they needed was, people were like, I have so much stuff in my attic, it's crazy, awful, horrible, no good. So once they connected them to, if you need to clean out your attic, here are some things that you can do before you get the, the money to, and like rates went through the roof. That people took them up on this program to put insulation in my thing. So what's this little thing that you can literally give people a little nudge, and that will get over some resistance and get them moving forward. And there's, I think it's in the UK, Kathy, correct me if I'm wrong, there's different governments now that have like the Minister of Nudging. Like it's not quite that topic, but it's something like that. It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating topic. Is there a Minister of Nudge? Oh, okay.
It's just a name.
Yeah.
He's a big name.
Yeah. Sorry, back to you, Natalie. So Sarah's saying, actually, nudge theory involves positive reinforcement and indirect suggestions to influence the behavior and decision-making of groups or individuals. It's fantastic, yeah. I can't think offhand of I'll look for it while someone else is talking. There's a fabulous podcast on nudge theory, which I tried to find. So does any of this, oh, someone is unmuting themselves. Sarah, is that you or Kathy? Oh, okay. So does any of that relate to gamification?
Yeah, definitely. It's very, very closely related. I just want to check that you can hear me because I had trouble with my
we
headset.
can hear you. Yeah, just fine. We can hear you.
Yeah, definitely. It's really psychology, motivation. Gamification is about really understanding somebody's emotions and not just coming at learning as a cognitive activity, but it integrates both our brains and our emotions and understanding the resistance that people have and then giving them tools to overcome that resistance. So very, very closely related.
Great.
Yeah. So these different player types that nudge theory probably talks about as well are they're called explorer, achiever, socializer, and socially dominant. So the first one is our ideal type of learner who's courageous and open-minded, who doesn't need nudge theory at all, or doesn't probably need gamification at all. They'd be in and playing no matter what. And what I've been researching is how do we create learners like this? How can we nurture someone to be in this ideal state? And then the second one, unfortunately, we nurture people and create achievers because of our current education system and I'll say our society, but that's very contentious when you're living overseas and don't know which society I'm referring to when I say that anymore. But the people that have been brought up to believe that they should be able to see the finish line and have a set of instructions on how to get there as fast as they can. It's a certain way of thinking, and I'm going to show you later the scientific research behind these personality types and how we as educators need to really understand these different states of motivation. And the third one is a lot of people really turn up and do something because they want to be with people. They want to socialize. So that's their main motivation. Some people don't. Some people are antisocial. So it's a factor that we can take into account. And the fourth one, it's the trickiest one, is that some people do turn up to interact and socialize, but it's because they need to dominate. They find joy in dominating. And in a classroom setting, I think we all know which kid we're talking about. That one that wants to take control, that one that wants to pick on the others and be the center of attention. Sometimes it's in the form of kindness and helping. The girl in the class that wants to be the mother hen and control everybody and tell them how they should do their homework, or that person in the office that likes to be in charge when they're not really in charge. There's some interesting ways of thinking about this fourth motivation type and how we can harness that passion and that eagerness to be involved, but help them mature to become less destructive in how they participate. So has anybody here heard of these four types before? Something similar to them?
I have. There's a great book, other than Natalie's, which I brought with me and I'll share with you. It's called something about, do you know the one about ninja monkeys and it's a really fun read, and it goes through all of these categories in a really interesting way. And
yeah,
also,
I'd love to have a look at that. Perhaps you could send me the name of it.
Yeah, I will look it up right now. And also I put in the comments, there is a podcast called Under the Influence. It's a CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation podcast, and it's season 18, episode 8, where they talk about nudge theory. It's called Nudge, the Persuasive Power of Whispers. So interesting. Yep, it's right on the screen. If you look on the comment. Where is it?
So I'm going to move into some examples of how I've used this knowledge in my design, but that's much later in this presentation. At the moment, I'm just throwing some terminology and concepts and ideas at you, and then we'll switch to practical application. So bear with me for this stage, and we'll get to discussions on how you also could implement it in your training. So one book that I'd recommend, it's called Theory of Fun by Raph Koster, who's probably the godfather of all games and game design. And there is a video presentation that I've got a link to in the footer where you can listen to him talking about his book, and it's just 60 minutes, so it's a lot easier for me to do that. But I was so fascinated that I went and bought his book. So he really describes the types of games that we have, those 4 blocks on the right of my screen. And he just digs in deep, really deep, and he's the one that uses this tic-tac-toe, noughts and crosses example to explain what he thinks fun and learning is all about. And the key phrase that I take away from him is that fun is just another word for learning. So in tic-tac-toe, you're learning, you're looking for the pattern, and what's going on in your brain can be measured. And that's what these game designers do. They literally spend a lot of money and a lot of time figuring out at what point in that noughts and crosses journey does the dopamine, which is the happy chemical, get released. And at what point does the hippocampus, which is about retaining memory, you remembered how to play this game. I don't know how long it's been since you've played it, probably decades if you're like me. But there's something in our brain that decided to remember the pattern associated with this game. So these game designers are really, really helping us understand that learning process. And at the top of the screen, I've switched it around a little bit and said, if I'm not learning, I'm not having fun. And without students or learners or trainees, I think their biggest complaint to us is that they come to our professional development sessions and they're not having fun generally. They're feeling like somebody made them do it. When they get there, the criticism that I face is it's not relevant to my job, it's too easy, it's too hard. Generally, we get told this is token training. You're not really helping me do my job better. You're just giving me a quiz to tick some boxes and I get a certificate. But there's a lot of criticism around the environments that we create. And we don't want it to be that way. We're all here to teach ourselves to be better instructional designers, to be better at our jobs so that we can make the learning experience more enjoyable. And hopefully what I can give you is some very persuasive arguments to take back to get better budgets to do the type of training and instructional design that we know is necessary to do quality learning. And if we can tell our managers and the people who decide on the budgets what we need, then it will become better for us as designers because we have the time and the space to really cater for all the different player types and take them on learning journeys. And then it becomes better for the learners and the managers get better results. So hopefully you can take some of my slides and convince people that we need more time.
Natalie, just to jump in quickly, Leah's joined us online. So Leah, welcome. And the book that I was talking about, it's so nice to have you. And the book that I was talking about earlier is called Even Ninja Monkeys Like to Play. And it's in the comment section. I'm walking through gamification with, and I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher his name, Andrzej Marczewski.
Ah, yes. Yeah.
Great, easy to read, really fun book.
Yeah. Okay, so just to go over that definition again, gamification, it not only models cognitive, but also motivational and emotional processes and their interactions. So that's what this session today is all about. How do we as designers really cater for motivation and emotions of our learners? And this is Raph Koster in the top left presenting, and that's the link. Perhaps Leanne can copy that link for you and put it into the chat. And what he was talking about at this point in his presentation was about sometimes when I say to people that we use play and games in education, they're imagining that I get dressed up as a clown and walk in with balloons and hand out lollies, which is far from the reality. that fun is not a constant. There's peaks of fun, but those peaks only are created if there's moments of boredom and effort and challenge. So as a designer, I'm actually creating scenarios that are challenging and puzzling, and only at the point where the person has solved and resolved that issue or challenge or puzzle do they feel fun for that moment. And it's very hard to pronounce this guy's name, Sheshavach or something, very hard to pronounce. But this is his theory on the right about fun and boredom being related to each other.
This is Csikszentmihalyi's work, yeah?
Thank you. That's the name.
Yeah.
So I don't want to end up giving you a whole lot of homework to do after this, but if you're interested, I'd like to give you references to follow up. And what's really also challenging for us as designers is what I find fun is not necessarily what you would find fun. And this man who researched the different games that people were buying from the Ubisoft company, so it's one of the biggest companies and one of the biggest game designers, he realized that there's players out there that like Disney dress-up games and he doesn't. So he sat down and he played the Disney dress-up games. He made himself a promise to play every game there was out there, and then went and interviewed people, and he tried to put the games into different groups of which games are about stimulation, harmony, novelty, and challenge. And then he went into psychology, and he's done some really good quality research mapping the OSEAN Big Five personality traits to these genres of games, and he did find correlation between them. Which,
so, Natalie, can I just stop you there? Not everyone might know the Big Five personality traits.
Yeah.
So it's the sort of gold standard for personality assessments, and what are the five? Agreeableness. There's a really, what's that one called? It's a horrible name. Neuroticism. There's five main categories that a lot of personality assessments are based on. Thanks.
So they're almost the same as the four types that I mentioned earlier. So one of them is openness, or being an explorer. One of them is extroversion and introversion, which is where you sit on the socialization scale. One of them is called conscientiousness, which is the high achiever type personality. So there is a link between the Bartle player types I first mentioned, these groups that Jason Vanderberg made, and then the science industry standard on grouping our personality features into these big five. And I did this research a few years ago because what I was doing in the classroom was so effective, but if I just tell people, look, we're just using gamification, it just doesn't have a whole lot of credibility. But when you can start bringing in scientific models and research against it, it helps managers feel like there's a solid foundation. And the resistance that we often get is that, well, children should feel lucky to have an education, and if they had a good attitude and came from a good home, they'd go to school with a good attitude and they would learn and they'd be motivated. But you can really test that. Is it just the individual person, or is it something else that's at the root of this lack of motivation? And this study decided to ask 13,000 twins, so it was a huge study. And when you're dealing with two twins that have come from the same home and are going to the same school, you start to realize that if this child is motivated in the maths lesson, but this child isn't, then maybe we have to accept that it really is the individual that we need to consider in our motivation, and it's worth spending the time and the money to look into this individual level. And these studies do give us reason to believe that individual differences are real, and we can get a better result if we acknowledge it. But the next question that people ask is this really effective in real life, or is it just something for for children, that games and play are something suitable for primary school but not in adult learning contexts, which is probably what's on your mind as well, thinking of the projects that you take on and the learners. And there is a lot of us, like Andres, who you just mentioned his book there, working in this gamification space. And we went to a conference in Barcelona where there was case study after case study of showing how corporate training has been so successful by using these elements. So I came up with a definition of what I think gamification is, and I'll read it to you now. It's a design process of using game elements and game thinking to reframe a real life task to be more appealing and more achievable. So when we talk about motivation, living here in Tanzania, the students and even older people are very thirsty for education. There doesn't seem to be any lack of motivation, but what's lacking is confidence. So the goal is appealing to learn English or to learn whatever the subject is, but it seems to be such a huge mountain that a lot of people give up in despair, and they still want it, but they don't feel capable. So I've broken up my definition of gamification into those two aspects of I want to and I can. And I think gamification for our context here, and perhaps Nairobi or not, I really don't know so much, but making a goal more achievable by breaking it down into levels is really the challenge that I'm working on in Tanzania. So I'll just stop for a minute and ask you, have you been using any of this already? Are you using any techniques to reframe a goal, a real life task or a goal to be more appealing or more achievable or more motivating? Perhaps as a parent, did you want your kids to do something and you found a way of getting them to do it?
Do you want us to talk about this in small groups or a large?
Well, we can stay as a large group. So the people online can make a chat comment and anybody in the room can.
So as a parent, teacher, or trainer, how have you designed more appealing and motivating experiences? Natalie, can you hear Jenny speaking?
No.
Do you mind coming closer? Or?
So I'm a trainer, and I do a lot of customer service.
Let me just check. How's that, Natalie? Can you hear her now?
Yep. Yes, thank you.
And one of the things that I found really useful is to try to have fun at work, because people who are enjoying their time at work are going to be more motivated and come across better to the customer. And one of the things that I use is trying to get them to think about how to play. But I use fish. I don't know whether you've ever used fish. It's very old. It's the Seattle Fish Market.
Yeah, Pike Place Market.
Pike Place Market. And I worked at the railway in the UK, and one of the train managers, we said we gave almost carte blanche for them to be creative on ways to have fun at work. And it doesn't need to be complicated. It can even be talking about the football scores. But one of these train managers just went to the pound shop and bought a whole load of rubber ducks and then taped them under the seats randomly of second class. And he then made an announcement that said, if you have a rubber duck under your seat, we're heading into London Heathrow, but we have half an hour, you're upgraded to the breakfast car. And he was able to do that, but it was just, I don't know whether it links with this, but it's very motivating.
Yeah.
It's just fun to work with that person and fun to be on that train, and so it's a win-win.
I think the interesting thing with the motivation is how it relates to the learning styles. So if someone, for example, that's a great example, and I don't have these in front of me, Natalie, but like for someone who's competitive, that would be lovely, right? That would be a great win. For someone who's more social, that motivational strategy might go backwards. It's like, but we're not all equal, and some of us got left out, and you know, yeah. So yeah, I mean, this stuff is just so interrelated, right? Depending on where you start. I've done an assessment on what motivates you based on National Geographic research, and when I work with clients, it's important that, you know, to just appeal to a variety of different motivational styles. What about you guys? Any, Sarah, were you going to say something there? Don't let me put you on the spot.
Sorry, no.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, share with us, Suzanne. So Suzanne's just coming up to share another story.
Just to fill the awkward silence, basically. No, I'm an intercultural trainer, and I always had difficulties with one certain block in my trainings, and I could see my group was getting quite bored, and the eyes were like disappearing. So it was a part where you had to describe the cultural dimensions of Hochstädte. And so I just designed the whole thing that they had to search for parts in the internet, and they had so I kind of tried to address the different characters as well, the ambitious ones, and so I broke it down to a game and made them find out what the dimensions are. And yeah, that really worked and made it a much better experience, and my feedback was much better.
Nice. And Leah's come in from online. Thank you so much. All the time, when I was teaching, a lot of math concepts were taught through games. For example, addition subtraction was taught through a market game where students would have to buy and sell produce and write the equation. So many games with counting bears, dice, etc. Even using Scrabble to see if the students could spell complex words or vocabulary words. Currently, I support teacher development of oftentimes use games to open sessions and have participants begin practicing the skills or concepts. For example, if you were stranded in various situations, space, desert, etc., how would you use the resources in your bag, water, notebook, mirror? Also in prioritizing tasks, collaboration, problem solving. Adults are willing to participate in games which feel a bit removed from reality, which makes it easier to bridge the game to reality. Nice. Yeah, I do much the same. We used to have a Humor in the Workplace Awards program, where for 3 years running, organizations would submit their nominations for who used humor strategically in the workplace. And then we had this big award show for the winners and runners-up. I've just designed an instructional design board game, so teaching trainers how to teach, where they use, it's kind of like snakes and ladders, if anyone knows that. You go up and down based on your answers. I have closets full of things that I use to teach to make it interesting and engaging. And I have an assessment called Life Lenses, which looks at what comes onto your radar easily, naturally, and comfortably, and what do you miss. And when people learn what their lenses are, one of the very last exercises is I pretend that I have the gold card of the CEO in my pocket, and the gold card has no limit. And they have to decide on what they're going to do after the training with this gold card. And they wear glasses that are the different colors of the lenses, and they can only speak based on what that lens would say. So that's been really fun. So yeah, tons of games, but I'm careful to not call them games or simulation thing. Like, adults just get hung up on that, right? And also there's a big difference between having fun and being silly. Adults in the workplace don't respond well to being silly. Right. So, yeah. Do you want to repeat this?
Well, the question has three different.
Natalie, can you hear Claudia speaking?
No.
Claudia, do you mind coming up? Sorry. It's the pros and cons of this technology.
Well, I'm curious about the question because you present three different roles: one as a parent, one as a teacher, and one as a trainer. I have been in the 3 different roles, and I tend to believe that it's very different, each one of them. As a parent, you are very understanding the interests of your child. So it's very easy to connect with what motivates. And motivation itself, it's a word that implies a movement, like how to move someone to do something, how to engage and keep their interest in doing what you think they need to be doing. So as a parent, for me, the strategy or the experience I have usually find very useful to. I feel I'm successful in motivating my children because I think I start from understanding the interest very clear, like what they want and not to really impose.
Right. So you're looking at it from their perspective.
I'm looking for their perspective. And as a teacher, I remember I was a teacher.
Can I just jump in, Claudia? Does anybody have children who, more than one child, and the children are motivated by completely different things?
Yeah, because
me too.
Yeah, because they're different characters.
Yeah.
So if you really understand their own thinking and their own drivers, it has to be a different.
Yeah, and if you try to use one strategy with one, with the other kid, it's like a guaranteed failure. It's not going to work.
When you talk about being a teacher, then you have also a more personal connection, but you have to be more general in the way you treat the group. You were saying that it's so common to have eyes rolling, how to keep the attention, even among our group. And I have to say that even though I admire the digital and the technical part, it interferes with the attention of the ones that are physically. Yeah. So I am always very puzzled in how to keep the attention of a group, even if it's for customer service, if it's for marketing. But to keep the attention of people, it's one of the biggest challenges, and I find it one of the most difficult things. And in that fun, in that happiness, it's a key and important element.
Absolutely.
And as a trainer, I had the opportunity to train in the United States for oral skills to very specific groups, like 2 or 3 people. And that is more related as a parent. Like when you have a very intimate relationship, it's more fun and it's more easy to connect and to keep energy flowing than when it's a group. Because a group, to manage a larger group is more challenging.
Really? Oh, I would say the opposite. As a trainer, because I'm a strong introvert. And Natalie, feel free to jump in anytime here if we need to bridge to another topic. But I'm a pretty strong introvert, and I like actually having larger groups because they can do small group work with each other, and I walk around and I'm observing, and I can bring them together, and I can get them to work in pairs. Like there's so many options. Right? Like I have one training coming up with 8 people, and one training coming up with 50 people. And for both of those groups, I'm doing team building. Yeah. And in my head, I'm like, oh, I've got so many more options with the 50 people. And I've got one coming up with 240 people.
I see.
So, 240, it's a big one. For 40 minutes. It's like, okay, really? How do I make it interactive? 40. Yes. Yeah.
Because in a way you take the human being as the main element of the dynamics. Yeah. It's not like, but anyway, I just wanted to share with you that it has been different, the parent, the teacher, and the trainer role in my life. Yeah. And how to motivate someone, and most important, and how to keep the attention going.
Yeah, and I can't remember the author's name, but there's someone who actually talks about the attention economy. Like you really can't do anything these days unless you have someone's attention. And
the attention is the basic of everything. Yeah. And if I understand that schools are prohibiting cell phones and everything, but in conferences, when the speaker starts, I mean, he has attention for a few minutes, and then everyone connects to the cell phone.
Well, it depends on the speaker. And it depends also if you're a digital native or digital immigrant, because I'm doing stuff on my cell phone, but it's all related. Like I'm taking pictures and I'm adding it to this note, so I'll remember this, and then, okay, I can put this here, la 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 la. Yeah, anyways. Natalie, that's a lot. It's a lot. Did you want to move us along? Did you have a backup question? What would you like? Yeah. Natalie? Maybe she's unmuted. Oh, okay. Oh, Hannah, welcome. Nice to have you online. Welcome. Oh, okay, there you are. Oh, and so we've got another person, Hannah, online, and Kathy switched from online to in-person, and she's crossed over. She's crossed over. So I was just, yeah, so we're throwing it back to you. Are you with us? You might have frozen there.
Yeah, my technology. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. So, so I wanted to say the reason that I put parent, teacher, and trainer in the same bucket there is for two reasons. On the point of view of the person that we want behaviour change. As a parent, I want my children to put their dirty clothes in the dirty clothes basket. That's the behaviour I want. As a teacher or a trainer, I also have an objective. I want this person to walk out of the room with an understanding of fractions, or I want them to walk out with an understanding of the standard operating procedure in the kitchen for your level of responsibility. At any point, we want them to do something, which is a very, very controversial way of thinking about learning and education. But for the point of view of gamification, it does help us to be really, really direct. What do I want from you? And then break it down into very small steps to get you there, which is probably the nudge theory coming in. Second reason that I wanted to put those three together is it's probably more of my own kind of light bulb moment when I started looking at all of this a long time ago. There's a website called the National Institute of Play, and there's a lot of alternate schools around that are very much encouraging play-based, game-based learning. And I was told a long time ago that play is an animal or a human's way of passing on survival skills for the future, which is true. But there's also something about play that addresses a power differential. So as a parent, teacher, or trainer, you are in a position of power, and the person who you are engaged with has less power than you. So straight away, we're opposing each other because of our titles and our positions. And play is a beautiful bridge to really address that power differential and diffuse it. So the things that you mentioned by using play and playful activities, it doesn't always have to be related to a learning outcome. Sometimes it is about establishing a good relationship and making the student feel less intimidated by us, because we can be pretty scary dragons when we want to be.
We have a question, Natalie.
Yep.
Or a comment. My experience is. Can you hear Jenny?
No.
So it's really just a comment. My experience is that whatever I do, but and I'm talking about a corporate environment, and I guess as a parent, as a teacher, as a trainer, so well, actually all three of those, is that while you want something out of it, you, as Claudia said, you have to think about what's in it for me, for that other person. Otherwise, I think you're not going to get through. You have to identify what that result is for their benefit as well.
Definitely. And sometimes we can give them something else, not exactly what we want them to do or have, but we can use an extrinsic reward but with the hope that we're building intrinsic motivation. And I'll get to that towards the end of this presentation. I definitely agree. Considering what they want, what they're here for is a big part of what gamification is. So I just wanted to jump back to a few examples that you gave. They're all great examples of gamification. And you'll probably think of a few more tomorrow, or the next day you'll go through your life and you'll realize, oh yeah, this is an example where either you were a recipient of a gamification strategy or you instigated it. You mentioned the rubber ducks on the train going to London. And I can imagine that would have created a very happy, chatty environment. And I get what you're saying, Leanne, that once you put a reward in place, you're really putting somebody above another person. And was the reward a cup of coffee? Was that what was involved?
The reward was breakfast.
Breakfast, yeah.
They were upgraded to first class on the train, and they got breakfast in the first class train.
Okay, so I think being upgraded to first class is something that people might be envious of, particularly my daughter. Whereas a free soda or a free cup of coffee, that's a lot less to offer somebody. There's not a lot of whole status involved in you get a free cup of coffee. And it is very dangerous. Like, how many of you pay your children to do chores around the house, talking about dangerous motivation strategies?
Sorry,
does anybody pay their children to do chores around the house? I don't want to admit it publicly.
I went to a parenting workshop many, many years ago that just blew my mind, talking about motivation. The speaker said, children, this was in Canada, children go to school and the teacher gives them a sticker if they did it all right, and they get a sticker for this and they get a sticker for that. Now fast forward to high school, and this, boy takes this girl out on a date and pays for dinner. Where's my sticker? Where's my reward? And I thought, oh man, that is such a good, and now many years later with the whole Me Too movement, it really stopped me in my tracks. And yeah.
I think it depends on how pay is used. I know some parents that talk about it in terms of when you grow up, you do work, and if you do good work, you're rewarded. So it's not like, there's a whole lesson behind it, and you can make income, you can save it. This was part of like this intense financial literacy course that we offered to some parents that someone came in and facilitated. But the notion behind it was money doesn't just fall from the sky. You have to do things to work for it. And when you do work for it, how much is your time worth, or what is worth 1 week or 1 month of saving? Is that worth a bike? Is it worth just throwing away on candy or something? So I've actually seen paying for chores done in a way that's productive when it's set up with obviously that explanation.
That's a great example. And the difference that I notice is it moves it from external motivation to internal. Right? Like the first example is here's money for a chore, period. The second example, Leah, if I understand you correctly, is you have this money now. What are you going to do with it? And like part of the negotiation is how much are you worth? How much is your labor? How much is your time worth? Right? That moves it to internal motivation, which I think is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do bring up these more controversial topics so that we understand that you can't say that using points is good or using points is bad, using money is good or using money is bad. It's a lot more subtle than that. It's how it's used, the strategy that you're coming up with, and then the recipient. You mentioned before that when we have children in a family, we know very well that one child might respond to some sort of financial reward for a chore and the other child wouldn't. So you have to keep on getting that user feedback. Is this strategy working in the way I expected it? And how can I refine this strategy to work more effectively with this group or individual?
Natalie, Kathy's asking a question. Can you hear her?
No.
Kathy, she can't hear you. Do you mind coming up?
So Natalie, the question I have, and now you're going to make me think, I'm sorry, I haven't had enough coffee to think. When you have two children who are in the same space, and so you talked about a classroom and there's more social pressure, but then two children who respond differently, but have the same bias of that's not fair. How do you explain, rationalize?
equality versus equity.
Yes.
That's what you're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah.
How do you like, they have different ways of responding to incentives.
And I happen to know that Kathy's children are quite young, which I think is, I mean, from my perspective, they're not as young as your child.
But I hear it's a lot, and so this fairness value, even if they don't want what the other one has, the concept that one person got it and the other didn't.
Well, because for children, fairness means the same, right? Fairness, but I think in kids' heads, generally speaking, like the concept of equity is difficult for children to grasp. Fairness means equality. Fairness means same. I don't know, Natalie, you've got younger children.
Well, I'll give you an academic reference because I usually do that. If you try to find something by Richard Bartle, Bartle, on player types and cheating, and I'll try to find the article again myself because it was just such a beautifully written article that what one person considers cheating in a game, the other player type doesn't consider cheating.
Can you spell his last name again? I'm just putting it in the comments. Bartle.
And I think we've all played enough games of Monopoly or Scrabble or whatever to know this is true. We can look at each other and go, no, that's cheating. And the other person will say, no, it's not. Like, it really isn't. I want to win this game, and it's okay for me to do that, to win this game. And in life, it's kind of the same, that because these children are coming from very different motivation bases, or the Ocean Big Five personality traits, they honestly believe that what's fair from one person's point of view and the other person's point of view, there is no plateau of eternal justice to arbitrate on. They're right. So if I have a son and a daughter, and I had fantasies about homeschooling them here in Zanzibar when I was going to be a perfect mother and I was going to be relaxed and have lots of time and homeschool my kids and invite some other kids. It's impossible to educate my son and my daughter in the same room. It's never going to happen. I gave up homeschooling them. And then I realized I could only do one. So I went to a very expensive private school and signed my daughter up because she has really strong social needs that this school was hopefully going to meet. And she started complaining bitterly that I was spending more time with my son than her because I loved him more than her, and why was I kicking her out of the family, and why was she so disadvantaged and so hard done by. In my point of view, it's the opposite. I'm spending money on a private education for one of my children and not the other. But she was the one saying it's not fair because I don't get to spend time with you as my mum, and that's more important to me.
Yeah. So Claudia's saying how important it is to understand the other person's point of view. Leo, were you going to say something?
No.
Okay. Sorry. Sometimes your name just, the Zoom really likes you. Sometimes your name flashes up on the thing, so I can't speak. It reminds me of
I'll tell you how I get around it when I'm designing, and I'll get to this example later, is I do group rewards, not individual rewards. And that's my easiest way of solving these dilemmas about fairness and shame and feeling like a loser, is once you dissipate it to a whole group, you win as a group or you lose as a group. And it hides a lot of these individual issues.
That's interesting. I did the same in my classroom where we had class points. So if everyone had their act together, like I told them, or if everyone was just kind of off somehow, right? And so it would motivate students to hold their peers accountable. And so we would celebrate collectively, even though some people are having a great day or a bad day. There's a lot of that peer pressure that now is put on that student who wants to misbehave. And they're like, come on, like we're all waiting for you.
And the actual reward that I give, it's generally very, very token, like a Milky Way bar or pizza. Like with the train and the rubber ducky, if I was in charge of that, I would have given a free cup of coffee if you were the one that got the rubber ducky. But actually the value that I see is that, and I would have done something to change that activity slightly, because I can imagine that people on the train are sitting there in their own little world, they're not talking to each other, then they get this announcement, everyone starts to look under the seat. So now you've created a group atmosphere because everybody's looking at each other, they're engaging. And I'd try to get more of that social element in there. So maybe if you get a rubber ducky, you have to find 5 people to draw a tattoo on your rubber ducky, and the first person to get to the canteen with 5 tattoos gets 1 cup of coffee. And then people actually have to talk to each other and go up and say, would you mind putting a tattoo on my rubber ducky? So you've got some social interaction happening there, and that's catering for the different people. And also be careful not to force participation. So make sure that if you didn't want to get your rubber ducky sign, you don't have to. You can just dip out at that moment, be happy that you got your rubber ducky, but you don't get the coffee.
So this is just to jump in. Sometimes it doesn't happen as much anymore, but often before I wrote a whole blog post on it. People would say to me, "Oh, I'm doing this event. Can you just give me can you just suggest an icebreaker or something?" And I'd be like, internally, no, because so much of this thinking goes on behind what exercise do you do with one group, and also what is your higher level aim. So, you talked about the social aspect. When I'm doing team building, if it's an overnight, I'll often offer an optional thing in the evening where they're broken into small groups and we're doing this treasure hunt thing. So because my higher order goal is to build the team, I don't want there to be one winner, right? But there can be, first, second place in the small groups. But I see these team buildings all the time. Like, let's go play golf. And it's like, dude, like, really? That's so 18, whatever, Not everybody wants to go play golf. And yeah, always interested or, yeah. So, do you mind coming up? We've got a question from Rachna coming in just a sec. Natalie, she's just moving up to the mic. By the way, I'm working on trying to get a Bluetooth microphone. So hopefully in the new year, so people don't have to keep moving stuff, I can move the microphone to you. So yeah.
Okay, so my question here is that talking about training and learning, we're talking about making people learn as well as keep them engaged. But when we're putting them into groups, so when we approach a particular learning session, do you approach it in a way that every person who is present in that training should learn and should be engaged?
Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing the question. Maybe a bit louder.
She's just moving to a different chair, just getting a little closer.
Okay, Natalie. So my question is that when you approach a learning session, when you are training somebody, let's say it's a group of 10 people. So when you go to that particular session, you have in your mind that all the 10 people who came into the session should have learned something out of it, should be engaged. Because when you put people in a group, we touched a point where we said that every individual is different. Somebody is socially dominant, somebody is socially interactive, and somebody likes to be an explorer or an achiever. So everybody, when you already are a group of 10 people, again, you split them into different groups. So what would happen is, let's take the example of the ducky itself. You said that you would want that who gets a ducky then goes and gets a token from other, or maybe a signature from other people, so that way there is a social interaction as well. But it's quite possible that a person who is an introvert, he might get a ducky, but he would say, oh, just for a coffee, why would I go and get signatures from other people? So when there is a group and you're all again splitting it into multiple groups, is the real intention of learning and engaging being served? Because again, in a group, there would be a person who may not be really enjoying what is happening. So there would be a socially dominant person in each group, within that bigger group, and he would come out better in it because he is more engaged or he is more motivated because of the prize which is there, or he's more or maybe he is motivated by the learning or whatever. So my basic concern here is that if we are trying to involve games into it and then that particular session is divided into multiple groups, is the purpose of learning being served? That every person who comes with an intention to learn, is he actually learning out of it?
So that's a great instructional design question. What do you think, Natalie?
Actually, the case study that I'm about to go into will answer that question in great depth, and it is a very good question. Let's stick to the rubber duckies as an answer to that question as well. And Leanne, you mentioned always having that higher order in mind on a sticky note on your wall. Why are we doing this? What's the real reason? And for me, I did have trouble hearing, but I think it was the actual train driver himself instigated this, or during some training. So I think the actual learning objective of this is that the person driving the train every day could become very bored and monotonous and not paying attention, and I'm just a train driver, I just click the button and the train goes.
Natalie, I'm just going to jump in. So it was the training manager who initiated it, and they just happened to be getting on a train. I'm just listening to it. Is that right, Jenny? Oh.
So we encourage staff to have fun. We encourage managers to make ideas, to have fun.
Yeah.
So this train manager on board a train, so in charge of the
Oh, so he was the manager of the train.
The manager of the train
Oh.
and he had a lot of food and he prepared them with waste, and he was like, how do I have fun and get this food eaten and enjoy the customer too?
Oh, so this was with the customers on the train.
Yeah,
okay, I misunderstood. Okay, cool. Oh, that's even okay. So did you catch that, Natalie? Essentially,
so it was the man driving the train. So he feels good at the end of the day because he's now got an emotional connection to his passengers. He goes home feeling like, wow, I'm a great train driver. My passengers are happy. They got a cup of coffee. They got to know that I made an announcement. It's building motivation for him to be really good at his job. I think that's really the learning objective. And the free cup of coffee that one of the passenger gets is really just a sideline to him being.
And the difference there, yeah, and the big difference that I now understand is that the community on the train is not a community except in that they happen to be on that train ride together. This wasn't a staff group moving from point A to point B. So, yeah.
Yeah, so they've gone from being complete strangers isolated from each other to being a happy group of humans, and the train driver can feel that good vibe, and hopefully tomorrow he'll be a better train driver and drive more carefully and be more punctual and be better at his job because he's imagining his happy customers coming along.
Nice.
Before I jump off the rubber ducky, it also reminded me of a jelly bean story, something similar at I think it was a game conference.
And now, just because I know you can't see us, I just want to let you know there's one pending comment or question. And I'm also just doing a time check for everyone. It's 11:45, so we've got about 10 minutes left before yeah. Did you want to take Claudia's comment or question, or do you want to do the jelly bean first?
Go for it. We'll take Claudia's question.
Okay. She's coming over to the seat. Oh, for Bluetooth headphones. Okay.
Well, just on the same line of question. Like how to serve the education purpose. And you were saying that the fun is a neurochemical reward to continue trying in your slides, it says. I tend to believe that has to be happiness. And happiness doesn't necessarily mean to be framed in a game. Mm-hmm. Happiness has to be learning. Yes, so I think the best, the main duty of someone who pretends to train or teach or even be a parent is not necessarily provide gains. I don't know how to say it, but to assure that the learning process goes on, that is fun, if fun means to produce this neurochemical reward. So my comment is happiness and the emotion of learning has to be there and has to be the duty of someone who pretends to teach or to be a parent or to be a trainer. It's like the main duty is you need to convey the happiness of learning.
That's an interesting
with a
choice of
very
words.
specific game or without the game. But the happiness of learning has to be presented not necessarily in a format of a game. It's one of the tools that could be.
Yeah, and I think there's, I did have trouble hearing, but I think you were saying that if the trainer is happy and there's happiness in the way that the lesson is being conducted, that's really important for the learners.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think we're maybe coming off a little bit, we're moving into kind of instructional design issues. Halima has just taken a seat and has a comment or a question.
I wanted to add on what she said about happiness. Yes, it's true. There need to be a connection, because you need to make sure your learners have like a safe space. They can be able to open up to you so that you can know these are your needs. So that aspect of happiness is really important, and as well being able to connect with your learner in as much as they're in a group or individually. So if you can be able to make a connection and ensure that yes, you're learning, but yes, I'm here, you can be able to open up and be yourself within this game that we're doing, so that I can be able to know your needs and you can be able to learn. So that's my part.
Yeah, I think we've raised a really interesting issue. For me, I'm not sure that happiness is the goal. I work with a lot of people that have experienced trauma or conflict or post-conflict. And I think what I look for when I'm designing my trainings is connection. Right? Because when people feel connected, I mean, ultimately you want people to feel relaxed and etc. But happiness is a high bar. Right? There could be a lot of other things going on in people's lives that it's just not, and it's just not a time in their life when they're relaxed,
And as well, you are too.
And I also, and maybe Natalie, you can speak to, we're kind of going down the path of things having to be a game, and maybe you can make this point that gamification of learning isn't necessarily playing games. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. It's tapping into why is gaming so popular and so immersive. It's so popular. Let's tease out the things that make it so popular and apply that to learning, which can mean a game, but it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be a game insight. Yeah. So we've got a few more minutes left before we close. So I just want to put it back to Natalie to continue.
Yeah, well, just very briefly, I think my time, this chart that I mentioned before, that fun is a point in the process. It's not the whole process. Happiness is a very, very different word to fun. So please just take some time to think about all these different words that we use for very similar emotions, but they're very, very different. It's fun to climb Mount Kilimanjaro for some people, not for me. But it's not fun the whole time. You hate it most of the time. But when you get to the top, it's fun. But you're not happy the whole time that you're climbing the mountain. So it's passion.
Natalie,
It's very sincere.
You're cutting in and out a bit with the audio. We heard when you get to the top, there's different points where you're having fun, and then you get to the top and that's fun, but happiness is a different experience.
Sorry, we've got this far and now the audio is playing out. We did well. So yeah, I was just saying climbing Mount Kilimanjaro is fun for some people, but it's not fun the whole time. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
It's certainly fun when they get to the top of the mountain or reach certain stations at the end of the day. And that's more how I think about the learning journey, is there are moments of fun, certainly not the whole time. And if we're talking about the trainer having happiness and the happiness of learning, the end goal is for the person to really enjoy the learning journey. And jumping back to the previous question, I actually found the ideal learning environment because our government started closing our colleges and sacking our teachers and cutting our courses. So I went from teaching a very small module to teaching certificate 3 and 4 and diploma in the one classroom. And instead of having 5 teachers doing the digital media program, it was me. I had to teach everything and everybody. And there was only 20 of them, so it's like not that there was heaps of people, but my workload was just totally unmanageable. So I asked them to teach each other at their own pace. And it was my ideal environment because I went from, here's 5 of you, these are my learning objectives, we are all going to be on the same pace at the end of this 45 minutes. I'm going to sign a sheet that I promise that we all learnt this one thing today, to being with a group of people who walked into a workplace simulation where I said, we're making a website. Does somebody want to do the graphics? Does somebody want to do the text? Does somebody want to upload it to the server? Choose what you want to do. And after they've done the certain actions, I would then map it against my curriculum and I'd say, oh, you've actually just learnt this skill and that skill and that skill, but there's a gap and that person over there knows how to do it. So how about on the next project, you take on a different role and ask that person to show you what they did. And then in the end, I can give you a certificate. That is going to take as much time as you want, fast or slow. I'm not the one giving you the learning objectives up front. I'm giving you the projects and the environment and the support and the mentorship, and you're navigating your own skills development. But I've rarely found that environment anywhere else because it's not what we traditionally do at colleges and schools. We break it down into such modular events that we can't do this individual self-paced learning. So when you do have a look at my slide deck, there's quite a few other slides in there. And if you look online, I've got some other presentations with some more information. So there's also, Leanne mentioned a book where I do talk about a lot of these philosophies and values, but then I talk about how I actually implemented it in my classroom.
I've got your book here, Natalie, and I'll pass it around.
And I think this website still exists, bit.ly TAFE Showcase. My students actually made this website, and there's some videos and photos there that shows how we use these groups to offer rewards, and we use badges. So if you mentored another student, I gave you a badge, which as far as my curriculum goes, didn't mean anything. It was all on top of the curriculum that I was given, but it created that motivation for people to aim higher and then teach each other. So you can have a look at the presentation. Excuse me, feel free to contact me and ask for some more references, and if there's anything particular that you'd like me to focus in at a more detailed level in another session, I'm happy to do that too.
Can I ask quickly, maybe Leanne or Natalie, is this presentation going to be on the Facebook group, or how can we access it?
Yeah, that's a great question, Leah. Give me probably till early next week.
Okay.
So everything's recorded, so there'll be an audio recording, there'll be a visual recording, as well as a recording of the chat. And I'll put that in our online portal. We have 6 years of meetings in that portal. That link is always at the bottom of the agenda. And then I'll also link to it. I'll put the video up in our YouTube channel so you can see it there. And I'll also put it in our Facebook group. So, yeah. Okay,
so it'll include the entire presentation, even what we didn't cover? Or?
Yes, the entire,
okay, perfect.
Natalie's graciously agreed that it's fine for me to share that. So, yeah, you'll have
Thank
everything.
you.
Yeah. So, Natalie, I'm just going to stop sharing the screen and click it back to us. I'm just going to click back to our agenda here, and just while I'm doing that, and I'll put on our video here. If I can invite Rachna to come up just for a sec. She has a couple words to say briefly. Hannah, really nice to see you online. Hope you're well and hope we'll see you soon. Okay. Yeah. She's just getting something and she'll be here in just a sec.
Hi, Natalie. This is Rachna. I thank you for the session. What I can say is this was something I'm attending, a learning session I'm attending after a very long time, because it's been quite some time since I left my job and became a full-time mother. So yeah, this is quite an interesting session because it was not only an opportunity to meet other people, as well as there were a lot of interesting points to think about and basically to take away from the session, so that something which we can apply not only in our jobs as well as into our personal lives as well. Yeah, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's give Natalie a hand. You guys can do a virtual clap online. And we also have signed a thank you card to you, which I will scan and send to you. This is, Natalie's a really, as we all are, has a very full plate, and she did this volunteer. So we just want to say a really big thank you. And a special thank you also to Rachna. This is her very first meeting, and I usually ask the first person who comes in if they can do a thank you. And I said, you can say no, you can say no. So first meeting, and she did the thank you. So just quickly to close, if you look again on the agenda, there's a link to Natalie's book. She's done a LinkedIn group for people interested in gamification. There's also a Facebook group and her website. So there's lots of resources there. Also, just another reminder, if you're not already on the list and you want to be on the mailing list, you just click on that thing, that link that's highlighted in yellow, and you'll get all the notices of when meetings are. There's a link there that will take you to the Facebook group. You can just ask to join. We also have a database of icebreakers, energizers, and group builders. There is a needs and assets learning and development space there. There's a contact list where we agreed 6 years ago that I would not share people's contact. So this is, if you choose to, you can fill that in. And then, Leah, you were asking about this. I'm just highlighting it here. This link here takes you to the portal that has all 6 years of meetings, so all of our agendas and speakers' contact information, etc. So just briefly, any community announcements? Anything happening in your community that you want to share? Halima? Halima has I'm just going to say it as you say it. Halima has a cultural event called Nubian Soup in Kibera on the 12th of December. And how would people get more information, Halima? Could you post that in the Facebook group? Okay, that sounds great. So everyone's invited to this event. And you'll put a link to it, you'll put more information in our Facebook group. Nice. Great. Anything else going on? There's a great photography, sorry Natalie, this is far from Zanzibar, but there's a wonderful photography exhibit happening tonight up in Honey of the Moon, that lovely artist little collective thing. No, it's a little ways away. If you're interested, come see me, I can give you more information. There's a ball tomorrow night, Latin ball, dance, on the dance floor. I don't know, I get them. This November is ball month here. This is like second of 3 that we're going to this month. No, I don't like to dance. I love to dance. I will be on the dance floor, yes. So, Yeah. So just a reminder, looking for ideas for next year. We've got January and February set. So please, if you have ideas of speakers and or topics and or networking, just come shoot me an email or a message on Facebook. This is our last meeting for 2018. So hope to see you all in 2019 on January the 18th. Thank you, everyone. And a big, big thank you to those of you participating online. I know there's, you know, it's just not the same as being here in person, but we really appreciate your time and efforts. And finally, just again, thank you, Natalie. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, Leanne. Thanks, Natalie.
Sorry, I'm just trying to stop the recording here.